Some places feel permanent. You grew up hearing about them. You maybe drove through one, stood in another, spent a weekend at a third. They felt like they'd always be there. But nothing lasts forever. Not even the places that feel like America itself. Today we're looking at 5 iconic American places that will close next. Which one dies first? Place 5. Fisherman's Wharf, San Francisco, California. There was a time when Fisherman's Wharf was the kind of place you absolutely had to see if you ever found yourself in San Francisco. The seafood, the fog, the sea lions lounging on the docks like they owned the place. Because honestly, they did. For decades, it was one of the most visited tourist destinations on the West Coast. You'd find people there who'd flown in from across the country just to eat clam chowder in a sourdough bread bowl on a windy pier, and they'd leave thinking that was a perfectly reasonable way to spend a vacation. And it was. The wharf traces its real origins back to the late 19th century, when Italian immigrant fishermen, many of them from Genoa, settled along the northern waterfront and built a working fishing community. The boats, the crabs, the crab stands, the smell of the bay at low tide, all of that was real before it was ever a tourist attraction. The tourism grew organically around an actual place with actual people doing actual work. That matters because it's also the reason the current collapse feels so jarring. This wasn't a manufactured destination that ran out of novelty. It was a living neighborhood that got hollowed out. Today, a lot of it is boarded up. The restaurants that defined the wharf, Aliotto's, which opened in 1925, Tarantino's, Castagnola's, have been shuttered since the COVID-19 pandemic hit in 2020 and never came back. That's not a temporary closure. That's gone. According to 2024 foot traffic data from the Fisherman's Wharf Community Business District, only about 75% of 2019's visitors have returned to the area. And that number is being carried almost entirely by Pier 39, which is privately managed and has the advantage of a thriving sea lion colony. Take Pier 39 out of the equation, and the rest of the wharf looks dramatically worse. In August 2024, Madame Tussauds San Francisco, located right in the Wharf District, permanently closed after 10 years of operation, ending what had been a 60-year history of wax museums in the area. It wasn't a small attraction shutting down. It was a signal. For 6 decades, there had been a wax museum at Fisherman's Wharf. Now there isn't. The lawsuits tell their own story. The owners of Fisherman's Grotto No. 9, which had been open since 1935, and Tarantino's, open since 1946, filed a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against the city of San Francisco. Their argument? That the city's mismanagement of homelessness, crime, pandemic lockdowns, and a structurally neglected seawall made it impossible to run a business there. The lawsuit cited $2 million in renovation investments, dry rot repairs, accessibility upgrades, swallowed by what the owners described as ongoing city negligence. The city, in their telling, essentially let the wharf rot while collecting rent from it. Other long-standing spots like Pompey's Grotto and Lou's Fish Shack closed under the weight of back rent they'd been unable to pay during COVID shutdowns that went on longer in San Francisco than almost anywhere else in the country. These weren't failing businesses before the pandemic. They were institutions. Pompey's Grotto had been a fixture of the wharf for decades, the kind of place where regular customers had the same table for 20 years. By 2025, CBS News described the streets around the wharf as nearly empty of visitors. One cruise company worker said that even the international tourist trade had dropped sharply, with large tour groups from France, Germany, Korea, and elsewhere simply no longer showing up the way they used to. Foreign visitors aren't going to book a trip to stand on an empty sidewalk in front of a boarded-up restaurant. The Embarcadero streetcar line, which had connected visitors from downtown San Francisco to the wharf, was suspended during the pandemic in 2020 and had still not been revived as of 2025. Reduced transit access, reduced tourism, closed businesses, increased homelessness, these things don't happen in isolation. They reinforce each other in a downward loop that's very difficult to break once it gets going. San Francisco has announced a redevelopment plan for the area. Redevelopment plans sound optimistic until you realize they usually mean the old version of the place is already dead, and something unrecognizable is going to replace it. The Fisherman's Wharf that generations of Americans knew, the working waterfront with century-old Italian seafood restaurants, salt air character, and boats that actually went out to fish. That version is already gone. What remains is a question mark, and the people who built their lives around the original place are either in court or out of business. Place 4, the Las Vegas Strip. Before you close the video, yes, Las Vegas is on this list. No, this doesn't mean the desert is going to swallow the casinos overnight, but the signs of strain are real, they're recent, and they're worth paying attention to. Las Vegas has always had a talent for reinvention, but reinvention requires acknowledging that something needs to change. And right now, the numbers are making that argument pretty loudly. Las Vegas was built on a very specific proposition. You come here, you spend money you probably shouldn't, you have an experience you can't get anywhere else, and you leave feeling like you got your money's worth. For decades, that deal worked. For a lot of people, it still does. But the deal has quietly changed, and not necessarily in the visitor's favor. Las Vegas welcomed approximately 38.5 million visitors in 2025. That sounds like a lot until you know that in 2016, the city hit a record 42.9 million. In 2025, Las Vegas suffered 12 consecutive months of year-over-year visitor declines, every single month down from the year before. It was the lowest annual total since the post-pandemic rebound year of 2021. Harry Reid International Airport served just under 55 million passengers in 2025, down from a record 58.4 million in 2024. And that included 11 straight months of year-over-year passenger declines. Caesars Entertainment swung to a $502 million net loss in 2025. MGM Resorts Las Vegas net revenue dropped 4%, with core operating earnings down 8%. Room rates on the Strip fell nearly 5%. Hotel occupancy fell 3%. Revenue per available room dropped 8%. These are not numbers any industry shrugs off. When multiple major operators are reporting losses simultaneously, that's not a bad quarter. That's a structural signal. The Strip has also made itself considerably less affordable for the average visitor, and that's a choice with consequences. In 2020, according to gaming analysts, 38 casinos in the Las Vegas market offered blackjack tables with a $5 minimum bet. By 2025, that number had shrunk to 6. $25 table minimums are essentially standard now. $50 minimums aren't uncommon. A city that built its entire identity on the idea that anyone, the truck driver, the school teacher, the retired couple from Ohio, could come and play, has steadily priced out a significant portion of its own traditional customer base. That's a remarkable thing to do to your own brand. International tourism took a particular hit in 2025. Air Canada and WestJet, two of the airport's largest Canadian carriers, each saw passenger declines of more than 20% for the year. International visitor volume overall dropped 7%, including a 22% decline in December alone. Some of this is tied to broader geopolitical and trade tensions that affected travel from Canada and Mexico specifically. Some of it is harder to attribute to any single cause. The online gambling industry is also pulling money and attention away from physical casinos in a way that simply wasn't possible 10 or 15 years ago. Nationwide online sports betting and digital gambling have been growing steadily. The convenience of placing a bet from your couch without buying a plane ticket or paying a resort fee is, for many people, a more attractive option than it used to be. New casino developments in states like Illinois and New York, closer to major population centers, also mean that people who once had to travel to Las Vegas to gamble no longer do. Then there are the closures. The Mirage closed in 2024 after more than 3 decades as one of the Strip's defining properties. The Tropicana also closed in 2024, ending its run as one of Las Vegas's oldest continually operating casinos. Both sites are slated for redevelopment, the Mirage into a Hard Rock property, the Tropicana site into a new ballpark, which is progress, depending on your point of view. But it's also the quiet erasure of another layer of what made Las Vegas, Las Vegas. The Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority CEO described 2025 as a challenging environment. That's the kind of careful phrasing that organizations use when the numbers are bad enough that they can't pretend otherwise, but they still need to project confidence. The Strip isn't going anywhere in the near term, but what it's becoming? More expensive, more exclusive, more reliant on high rollers and less accessible to the regular visitor, raises real questions about its long-term place in American life. Place 3, Coney Island, Brooklyn, New York. Coney Island has been dying by degrees since at least the 1950s, which is either a testament to how tough it is or a sign of just how slow the decline has been. Probably both. It's the kind of place that keeps surviving precisely because people can't bring themselves to let it go. But sentiment only goes so far when the infrastructure underneath it is literally falling apart. There's a difference between a place that's struggling and a place that's been struggling for so long that struggling has become its defining characteristic. Coney Island crossed that line a while ago. At its peak in the early 20th century, Coney Island was the most famous amusement destination in America, arguably in the world. In the summers before World War II, it wasn't unusual for 1 million people to visit in a single day. 1 million people on one peninsula in Brooklyn. 3 amusement parks, Steeplechase Park, Luna Park, and Dreamland, competed with each other to be the most spectacular place on Earth, constantly outdoing themselves with bigger rides, stranger attractions, and more elaborate spectacles. It was, for a few decades, the closest thing America had to a shared public carnival, a place where immigrants, factory workers, and middle-class families all showed up on the same stretch of beach and rode the same rides. Dreamland burned to the ground in 1911 and was never rebuilt. Steeplechase Park closed in 1964. Luna Park, the original one, had already been gone since 1944. Each closure took something irreplaceable with it. By the late 1960s and through the 1970s, Coney Island had gone from the world's playground to a byword for urban decay, rising crime, disinvestment, and the broader collapse of New York City's finances all hit the neighborhood hard. The beach was still there, the Wonder Wheel, built in 1920, still turned. But the magic that had made it legendary was largely gone. What remained was the skeleton of something extraordinary, picked over and left in the sun. A slow revival came in the 1990s and 2000s. A new Luna Park opened in 2010, operated by a private company. The Brooklyn Cyclones minor league baseball team arrived in 2001. There was genuine energy and genuine investment, but underneath all of it, the structural problems were still there, getting worse every year. The revival was real, but it was also shallow. A fresh coat of paint over a foundation that nobody had properly inspected. The money went into attractions. Almost none of it went into the ground those attractions were sitting on. What remains today is a neighborhood that's deeply seasonal, economically fragile, and physically deteriorating. The Riegelman Boardwalk, the 2.7-mile stretch that runs along the beach and was built in 1923, has been described by city officials themselves as unsustainable to maintain. Its wooden beams and concrete piles have cracked. The wood has rotted in sections. There are loose screws, gaping holes, and uneven planks throughout. The Parks Department team tasked with ongoing repairs has, by their own admission, addressed only about 1% of the boardwalk. The boardwalk is over 100 years old, and roughly 99% of its structural problems remain unaddressed. That's where things stand. It is, in the most literal sense, a place that is falling apart while people walk on it. After a casino development proposal for the area was rejected by a community advisory committee in September 2025, New York City announced a $1 billion plan to reconstruct the boardwalk as part of the broader Coney Island West initiative. That plan also includes 1,500 new housing units. It sounds like real commitment. The catch is that community input sessions aren't expected to begin for another 2 years, and a construction timeline hasn't been established. The design hasn't even been commissioned yet. So the boardwalk that exists right now, with its rotting wood and structural cracks, is falling apart in real time, and the replacement is years away at minimum. $1 billion is a serious number, but $1 billion that hasn't been designed, permitted, or scheduled is just a press release. There's also the climate question. Coney Island sits at its highest point only 7 feet above sea level. Hurricane Sandy in 2012 caused devastating flooding across the peninsula and required a major rebuilding of a 5-block section of the boardwalk afterward. The new reconstruction plan includes elevating portions of the boardwalk for flood resilience, which is an acknowledgement that the next major storm could do what a century of slow decline hasn't quite managed to finish. Climate projections for the New York metro area suggest that storm surge events like Sandy will become more frequent, not less, making the timing of this reconstruction not just a matter of historic preservation, but of basic safety. The question isn't whether another storm will hit, it's whether the boardwalk will still be standing when it does. The off-season reality of Coney Island is stark. When summer ends, foot traffic drops to almost nothing. Surf Avenue at night becomes, in the words of people who live there, a deserted, quiet space. Local businesses without national brand recognition close early or don't reopen at all. The neighborhood has one 24-hour deli. One. The people who live there year-round, and there are real people, real families, living in those apartment blocks behind the boardwalk, exist in a neighborhood that the rest of the city essentially forgets about between Labor Day and Memorial Day. Coney Island is a place that Americans love as an idea more than they love it in practice. The Cyclone roller coaster, built in 1927 and a designated New York City landmark, is still running. The Wonder Wheel is still turning. Nathan's Famous, which opened at Coney Island in 1916, is still there. These things have survived longer than most American institutions, but the boardwalk they sit alongside is quietly collapsing, and the plan to fix it won't be designed for at least 2 more years. The gap between what Coney Island is supposed to be and what it actually is has been widening for 70 years. At some point, that gap becomes the whole story. Place 2. Route 66, the Mother Road. Route 66 was officially decommissioned in 1985, so in a strict sense, it already closed. But the road itself still exists across most of its nearly 2,400 miles from Chicago to Santa Monica. And there are businesses, towns, and entire communities that have staked their identity and survival on it. Those are what's disappearing, one by one. The road is still there. The life that once ran along it mostly isn't. The story of Route 66's decline is really the story of the American highway system outgrowing it. When the interstate highway system expanded in the 1950s and 1960s, travelers stopped using the old 2-lane road. The towns that had grown up entirely to serve those travelers, gas stations, motor courts, diners, had no alternative source of income. They just faded. And unlike urban neighborhoods that can attract new industries or repurpose old infrastructure, a small desert town built around through traffic has essentially no fallback when the traffic stops. There's no pivot available. There's no secondary economy waiting in the wings. When the cars stopped coming, the town stopped functioning. And that was more or less that. What made this especially brutal was the speed of it. Interstate bypass routes didn't phase communities out gradually. They simply redirected traffic overnight. A town that had served 10,000 travelers a week could find itself serving a few hundred within a single season. Businesses that had been profitable for decades couldn't survive that kind of drop. The closures came fast, and most of them were permanent. Some have faded completely. In Arizona, the town of Texola sits near the Texas border with a population that numbered just 43 people in 2020. The only operating business was a grill that was temporarily closed when last counted. Its owner said flatly, "The way that it will never be like that again." That quote carries a weight that's hard to overstate. It's not nostalgia. It's someone who lived there, ran a business there, and arrived at the conclusion that revival simply isn't coming. There's no bitterness in it, just the flat recognition of a fact. In California's Mojave Desert stretch of the road, towns like Amboy, which includes Roy's Motel and Cafe, a mid-century American landmark, have a permanent population of 0 as of 2024. The property is still there, still being worked on by its current owner, but 0 permanent residents isn't a community, it's a monument. A very photogenic monument that draws road trippers and photographers, but a monument nonetheless. There's no school district, no post office, no local economy in any meaningful sense of the phrase. When the last full-time resident left, Amboy stopped being a town and became a set, a perfectly preserved backdrop for people passing through on their way to somewhere else. The towns that survive along Route 66 today do so almost entirely on international tourism. Travelers from Europe and Japan in particular, who are drawn to the romantic road movie version of American history the road represents. The problem is that romantic interest doesn't pay the bills the same way real traffic does. A town that exists primarily as a backdrop for photographs is already more museum than community. And museums, as anyone in that business will tell you, are expensive to maintain and difficult to sustain without a reliable paying audience. International tourism is also vulnerable in ways that domestic traffic wasn't. Exchange rates, travel costs, geopolitical tensions, and airline route changes can all cut visitor numbers significantly in a single year. The National Historic Route 66 Federation and various preservation groups have worked hard to save what remains. Some stretches have been added to the National Register of Historic Places. Congress has periodically considered legislation that would give Route 66 formal recognition as a National Historic Trail, which would unlock federal preservation funding. But preservation and vitality are two different things. A ghost town with a historical marker is still a ghost town. The marker tells you what was here. It doesn't bring it back, and it doesn't give the 43 people still living in Texola a reason to stay. Place 1. The American Shopping Mall. This one might be the most personal for people who grew up in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, because the mall wasn't just a place to shop, it was a social institution. Saturday afternoon at the mall was its own kind of American ritual. The food court, the record store, the movie theater, the department store anchor at either end. For teenagers especially, it was one of the few places you could go that was climate controlled, free to enter, and genuinely public in the sense that anyone could show up. You didn't have to spend money, you just had to be there. That world is gone, and the buildings are following it. No new indoor megamall has been built in the United States since 2006. Mall vacancy rates at the end of 2024 sat at 8.7%, more than double the vacancy rate for standard retail space. In the first half of 2025, nearly 6 million more square feet of mall space were vacated than were occupied. 6 million square feet in 6 months. To put that in perspective, that's roughly equivalent to every single storefront in a mid-sized American city going dark simultaneously. Retail analysts at CoreSite projected that total U.S. store closures in 2025 could reach 15,000, more than double the 2024 level. The department stores that served as anchor tenants and drew foot traffic to everything around them have been disappearing for years. Sears is essentially gone. JCPenney has closed hundreds of locations. Macy's has been closing stores steadily. When the anchor leaves, the smaller stores around it lose their reason to be there, and the vacancy spreads. A mall without an anchor is like a neighborhood without a grocery store. Technically functional, but missing the thing that made people come in the first place. Some analysts have projected that up to 87% of large shopping malls could face closure over the next decade if current trends continue. That's not all malls, and some of the most successful luxury and lifestyle malls are doing well. But the classic enclosed suburban mall, the kind that defined American commercial life for 30 years, is in genuine structural decline. The malls that are thriving tend to be the ones that never depended entirely on retail in the first place. The ones with movie theaters, restaurants, fitness centers, and entertainment options that give people a reason to show up, even if they have no intention of buying anything. The irony is that the ones that do survive tend to do so by becoming something other than a mall. Apartments, medical offices, warehouse space, mixed-use developments, whatever it takes to fill the square footage. Which means that even the survivors aren't really malls anymore. They're just buildings that used to be malls. The form survives while the function disappears, The same way a church converted into a bar still has the stained glass windows but none of the congregation. The stores keep closing. The anchor tenants keep leaving. The teenagers who once treated the food court as their social home are on their phones now, shopping from their bedrooms. The mall didn't lose to any single competitor. It lost to a whole shift in how Americans live, how they socialize, how they spend leisure time, and increasingly, how they think about the concept of going somewhere to buy something, when that something can arrive at the door by tomorrow morning. E-commerce didn't kill the mall overnight. It just made the mall slightly less necessary every single year for 20 years, until slightly less necessary became barely necessary at all. So, which one dies first? Fisherman's Wharf, in its original form, is already gone. The famous restaurants are shuttered, possibly permanently. What remains is a hollowed-out version of the destination it once was, waiting on a redevelopment plan that may or may not restore anything resembling the original character. The American mall, as a category, is dying the slowest death in commercial real estate history. Too slow to feel urgent, too steady to ignore. Hundreds have already closed. Hundreds more are on the way. Coney Island keeps getting emergency plans and billion-dollar announcements, which tells you that people want to save it but aren't quite sure how. That's been the pattern for 60 years. Route 66's small towns are disappearing quietly, with no fanfare, no billion-dollar plans, just a gas station that closed and never reopened, and a population that drifted somewhere else. And the Las Vegas Strip, it has more money and more corporate backing than any of the others. It will adapt, restructure, rename itself if it has to. But it's also showing strain in ways it hasn't before, and the question of what it becomes in the next 20 years is genuinely open. None of these places exist in isolation. They're all products of a specific American moment, a specific way of traveling, spending, and spending time together that has been shifting under everyone's feet for decades. Some of them will survive in some form, some of them won't. All of them are worth paying attention to before they're gone. If you made it this far, you probably care about these places the way a lot of us do. Not just as tourist destinations, but as pieces of American life that meant something. If this video gave you something to think about, hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. There's a lot more of this kind of history worth talking about.